G'day, it's Paul Rowe, the Outback historian. I thought I'd share with you a few of my experiences in the Outback having Christmas. One thing that came to mind was Pro Hart's little book here that he illustrated, the Outback Christmas, and it's Norman Habel's attempt to sort of explain Christmas in terms of the Outback style. Here's how one verse goes: it's the Bethlehem pub. A country pub is not a proper place for women, the last place on earth to try and have a kid. So when Mary and her tired old man arrived at night, I rustled up a bit of straw out in the shed. I had a mate in Burke, Mel Robinson, and one poetry night at Burke, he said, "Hey, this one's for Rowie," calls out, and he recited a poem pretty much like that about Mary and Joseph arriving on horseback, and the shearers looking after them in the shearing shed and preparing a place for the baby, and then 3 Afghans turned up on camels, and it was nice. It was nice that he made the effort to do it. He wasn't particularly religious, but he knew I was, and he wanted to make a gesture to me, which was kind of nice, I thought. But it astonished me how often in Burke there's so many poetry, so much a part of life out there. It really surprised me, and I was very surprised to find that Charles Dickens, who was the rock star storyteller of the 19th century, I mean, he was the man, had actually sent 2 of his sons out to Australia. And if you read his books, you'll know that a number of his heroes were sent out to Australia, or sub-heroes, some of them, to improve them, to make them, better people. He had this ideal of Australia being the place to send people. So he sent 2 of his sons, and one of them, Edward, ended up, first of all, in Mumba Station down near Wilcannia, and then he came up the river, part-owned Yanda Station near Burke, and he was actually an alderman on Shire Council in Burke. So I was very astonished to find that Charles Dickens' son had been part of the Burke story that I was part of too. And a little bit of research I was doing, I found that he had written this letter to his sons, and it's quite remarkable. He says, "Never take a mean advantage of anyone in any transaction, and never be hard on people who are in your power. Try to do to others as you would have them do to you, and do not be discouraged if they fail sometimes. It's much better that they should fail in obeying the greatest rule laid down by our Saviour than that you should. I put a New Testament among your books for the very same reasons, with the same hopes, and that made me write an easy account of it for you when you were a little child, because it's the best book that will ever be or will be known in the world, and because it teaches you the best lessons by which any human creature who tries to be truthful and faithful to duty can possibly be guided." And so he says he gave one of these New Testaments to each of his sons and reminded them that this was the book, the one book that would guide them through life, and to follow Jesus' teachings was the key to it. So Charles Dickens, the #1 storyteller of the 19th century, he was a man of faith. Well, each December I have a habit of picking up this book. You can see it's pretty worn and old. It's A Christmas Carol, and it's Charles Dickens' short story, 100 pages, and it features a man called Ebenezer Scrooge, and you probably heard the word Scrooge. In fact, it's become synonymous in English with miser, and that's how he's remembered. But I want to tell you another side to the story, because if you think about what we read in the letter there from Charles Dickens to his sons, he meant this as a redemptive story. There's a Christian underpinning to it, and it's the change that happens in Scrooge, the transformation, that's the main storyline that he wants to get across. And so I feel sad when I've read reviews of the story. They sort of talk about, it was kind of an improvement in the bloke, and he became a nicer man, and that sort of humanistic sort of transformation. But what I've read to you tells you that Charles Dickens saw that Jesus was a sort of the underpinning part to this story. So when I read it each Christmas, and I read it through, and watch the 3 spirits who come to visit him, spectres, the ghost of Christmas past that takes him back and makes him visit the scenes of his youth when he was cheerful and bright and optimistic and a kind soul. it draws Scrooge back to what he was, you know, and then the Ghost of Christmas Present shows him how he's become this mean-spirited, miserable kind of character that nobody wants to know because he's grasping and he's greedy, and he lives alone, and his life has kind of shrunk. He's shriveled, and Scrooge is horrified as he looks at different scenes with people and what they're saying about him, saying, well, he's a tragic figure, who wants to know him? And then the final spectre comes along and says, this is the Ghost of Christmas future, saying, well, you could die unlamented, unknown, uncared for, alone. So that scares the daylights out of him. he thinks, no, I've got to be a different man. And I think when the story ends and he's bright and he's cheerful and he's giving money away and he's helping poor families and he's trying to make up for lost time and return to where he began. I think that, personally, Dickens had the story of Zacchaeus in mind. You might remember that story where Jesus visits this grasping, greedy little tax collector who nobody wants to know, who everybody shuns. And the visit to Zacchaeus' house, he comes out from that visit, that having a meal with him and sitting down and talking it through, that man's transformed, and he comes out and announces he's going to pay back everybody he's cheated. In fact, he's going to even double pay them back. And it's interesting, Jesus' remark is, salvation has come to this house today. And I think when I read the story of Scrooge and the change in his life as the spirits come to visit him and show him what he was, what he is, and what he could be, will be, I think Dickens had in mind the story of Zacchaeus, and that salvation came to that house that day. So this Christmas, I hope that maybe you'll pick up the Christmas Carol and read it. It's, 19th century literature, but it's Charles Dickens at his best, and he left us these amazing characters, and Scrooge is among them. But I hope that you don't just think of Scrooge as the miser, but think of him as the transformed man. That the gospel, I think, changed his life, the good news, just like it did Zacchaeus. The book ends with a little crippled boy who Scrooge eventually tries to help. And that little boy, when he went to church, he said, well, I hope that people in church see that I'm here and that I'm lame, because it will remind them of the Saviour who made blind people see and lame people walk. And right at the end of the book, he has the last word. He says, his little expression was, God bless us, everyone. So I hope that's true of you at Christmas, and I hope the words of Tiny Tim touch your life and your family. God bless you, everyone. I'm the Outback Historian, and I hope I catch you down the track.